In a lot of ways, protests over the Trans Mountain Pipeline project have come to define politics in this country. And one way or another, this debate is coming to a head. On Tuesday, the federal cabinet will decide whether this plan goes ahead or not. I mean, the feds spent $4.5 billion to purchase the pipeline. Proponents, and there are many in Canada, say it is vital to the future of Canada's economy, potentially pumping $7 billion into it. Critics say it will lead to environmental disaster, and protesters have aimed to stop the pipeline expansion in its tracks. When Burnaby Mayor Mike Hurley stepped into his office for the first time last October, leading this fight was his first order of business. He's taken that message all the way to the top, having a face-to-face meeting with the Prime Minister earlier this month. The Trans Mountain expansion project would add more than 1,000 kilometers of pipeline from Alberta's oil patch to coastal British Columbia. It would increase tanker traffic from about 5 vessels a month to 1 per day, tripling the amount of diluted bitumen that travels from Edmonton to the Burrard Inlet port in Burnaby. So what are the fears of Burnaby residents? If the pipeline expands, the number of oil tanks in Burnaby will also rise. A report from Simon Fraser University actually suggested the expansion could increase the risks of oil spills and fires in the event of an earthquake. Trans Mountain has denied there's any greater risk, and a pro-pipeline campaign out of Alberta basically said another delay here will keep us from building schools and hospitals. Joining me now to talk about all this from Vancouver is Burnaby Mayor Mike Hurley. Mr. Mayor, how do you balance that need for economic prosperity on the one hand and the needs of you and your constituents on the other?
Well, I don't think you can fairly balance it when our community, and I'm talking about Burnaby, is taking all the risk. So I don't really think there is a balance to this whole issue. I mean, all the risk is coming with us through the expanded tank farms and through the extra flow that will be going through our Westridge terminal. So my main concern, and as a former firefighter, is, my main job is to protect the citizens of Burnaby. And that's what we're trying to do in the best possible way, not even getting into the environmental impacts and wildlife impacts that are so great with this so-called expansion of this project.
But on the economic prosperity front, I mean, as you say, you guys have already that tank farm. There are tankers coming in and going out. You know, the proponents really say they're just simply talking about twinning an existing pipeline. You guys have benefited from that. Your community has benefited in terms of jobs and prosperity.
First of all, it's not twinned in Burnaby. The pipeline, as proposed, goes in 2 completely different directions in Burnaby and rips up one of our parks in the midst of doing that. So I really take issue with people calling it a twinning, because certainly in our city, it is not a twinning. It goes a completely different direction. And so it's not that simple within Burnaby. The rest of your question, yes, in the 50s there was tank farms built up there when there was little or no other issues around the tank farm at that time, including the university just above it, and including homes that are now within 500 meters of the first tank. So there's a lot more risk at this time. We also understand a lot more of the risks that are involved with a tank farm than we did in the 50s. And so I would relate this to like the tobacco industry and to things like the asbestos industry, where we let things happen in the 50s that we certainly wouldn't let happen today. So I don't see doubling down on our mistakes and putting our community at even more risk.
So what do you do if this does get greenlit this week? I mean, do you keep fighting? Do you change tactics? What does the day after this decision look like for you?
Well, if the decision goes the way that most of us believe it will, then we'll sit down and re-look at all our options, what we can do to best protect Burnaby. And we'll certainly won't back down from anything that we have to do to protect our citizens.
But will that be continuing to fight this regardless of the decision, or trying to find some ways to sort of mitigate the conditions in which this pipeline does go forward and try to find a way the federal government can address your concerns?
We will never agree that it should go ahead in any case. However, if it's pushed through, and Justin Trudeau will have to make that decision if he's going to push through and not really have concerns about our citizens and what they think, then we will have to hopefully get in a room with the experts and not a bunch of lawyers to figure out how we're going to protect, in the best possible way and in a gold standard way, our residents in Burnaby.